also talk about innovation. What are the bases for impulse innovation in an intelligent community?
Well, innovation is any kind of new application or thing. It doesn't have to be an invention. It can be a new way of doing things, as opposed to coming up with something completely new. So what we say to a lot of communities is look for your strengths. You don't necessarily have to invent something completely new that you have no traditions in. So smaller communities, they may in fact build on those strategies. So let me just give you a quick example. In Canada, there's a little town called Stratford, Ontario. Stratford, by the name, suggests theater. So they do in fact have a Shakespearean theater, but that was seasonal in the summertime. The rest of the time they also had an agricultural base, and they did a little bit of mechanical work around railway. That's it. So what do you do for the rest of the year? So they looked at the intelligent community approach. They expanded to attract an educational institution, digital media, because of the relationship with the theater. Then because of the fashion and because of the design, stage design and so forth. Now they teach that as part of a year-round program. Then they incubated businesses that were related not only to agriculture and so forth, but also to theater. So now you have the beginnings of a year-round business. The other aspect of it was that they learned how to take advantage of their community's electrical system and developed an internet facility around that. And the Wi-Fi that they developed for the community then has attracted all sorts of beta testing. And they became a beta testing center. Because of that, they were able to attract a lot of money for autonomous vehicles to be tested in their little community. And because they're small enough and agile enough to work within that, these autonomous vehicles, these pilots, find that that community is a perfect example of where they can learn how to utilize autonomous vehicles in a community. So you saw that from growing from a community that was just agriculturally based, over the years it was able to begin to thrive based on entirely new and innovative opportunities for the community.
Yeah, so it's clear the impact in sustainability and this access in unequal possibilities for population, as you have been talking. Let's talk a little bit about the stakeholders of the intelligent community. What are the main stakeholders? Because I imagine that this is impossible to put in place if there is no collaboration between public and private sector.
Well, so one of the first things that we find is an intelligent community has leadership. There's a champion for the creation of smart and intelligent elements in their community. That leadership seeks out people in the community to be collaborative with one another and to begin to work together. One of the principles behind the intelligent community's benchmarking process is to require them to undertake a bit of an audit. And we find that many of these communities cannot answer the questions of this audit by themselves. They must seek others at the table. So the champion usually finds people who are technically capable, finds people from the political side, finds people from the business community. They form a committee and are able now to develop this audit, this intelligent community audit, which they then use to apply to the ICF for their award system. And that's part of our methodology. So having a champion could be a mayor, but it doesn't have to be a mayor. It could be somebody from the school system, whether it's a primary school or in a bigger city, a university. It involves the private sector. And through this public-private partnership, the community comes together, learns about itself. It's surprising how many people in a community aren't aware of all the assets that they have in a community. And from there, they develop a strategic plan. That strategic plan around a smart infrastructure and then about an intelligent community is essential, because then once they understand those elements, now they can begin to foster the growth through innovation, through developing resiliency plans, working on digital equality issues, all those different things. Once they get to a certain point where they have made these strategic plans, then they build in this economic and social sustainability aspects through public policy. And that part is very important, because now the citizens have become engaged, and that citizen participation along with the leaders, whether it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's government or business or whatever, it requires the community to get behind this. And I think that evolution is part of a successful transformation of the community. And therefore, it's more from the bottom up as opposed from the top down.
We mainly work with organizations, and we use this concept of the intelligence of the system, in which all the voices have to be heard, because they have knowledge, experience, something that it is important for the growth of the system. Let's talk about companies, because at the end, a company is the reflection of the community in which is operating. What is the role of companies, and how this spirit of the intelligent community can go into the company to build another kind of relationships? So, what is your experience, and if you have some examples?
Sure. So let's think about in some of these smaller communities, having these companies involved is very important. They help to bring the technology to the table. They help to explain things. They could, in fact, be part of the leadership that helps the community to coalesce and become part of a collaborative program to develop their own local intelligent community. So some of these smaller companies might form together through an incubator or through a society. So one example is in a place that I'm familiar with in Waterloo, Ontario. There's a group called Giménez, which was built by the smaller companies in the community. At that time they were small, but they grew. And some of these are now big companies that come out of this. So Giménez, with companies like BlackBerry and others that are part of the Waterloo community, have actually created a very substantial network and a partnership of businesses to create a very significant role for that community and for that part of Canada. And so that is a very good example. Then you take some of the bigger companies, Oracle, IBM, Cisco, those sorts of companies, and Google now. I'll talk a little bit about an experiment that Google is undertaking with the city of Toronto. We have an area of the waterfront in Toronto that Google, through its a subsidiary called Sidewalk Labs out of New York, and what they're doing is they're taking 12 acres of waterfront property, and they're going to test every aspect of human life in that 12 acres, from mobility to use of broadband to construction, how people move, how people live in a particular area, how they get educated, and how they do business. And those will have sensors. Data will be created as a result of that, and Sidewalk Labs will then test and try to explain and create benchmarks from that information. Now, it's pretty new, so there are going to be questions around privacy, and there are going to be all sorts of issues that will be discussed as a result of that. But it'll be very interesting to have this private sector company undertake this kind of study, because we'll be able to learn a great deal from it over the next several years, and we may be able then to apply that information. So the value of businesses to be able to undertake those things is extremely important. Government doesn't have that kind of role. It doesn't have the capability to undertake those kinds of tests and benchmarks and so forth. I think that having a public-private partnership, which that is, to do that kind of experiment, pilot as one would call it, I think is really important, and we'll be able to see the results of that coming forward.